Hello, and welcome to We Live for Saturday, your favorite college football podcast. I'm your co-host, Mike, and with me, as always, is your other co-host, John. John, how are you doing this evening?
I'm doing good. The weather is slowly turning into spring. I know there's supposed to be some cold, wet weather here this weekend, but I think the snow is pretty much done. So I was able to get some yard work done today, but also I've just got I got a full plate this week. So it's going to be busy pretty much until next Monday. But it's good, man. I don't really, no complaints, just, preparing for everything coming up this spring and being able to finally get to do some stuff outside.
Yeah, well, I don't like spring. We don't need to rehash that again. We did that on another podcast. But so it is what it is. The spring forward is always my least favorite night of the whole year because it just goes from 1:59 a.m. to 3 a.m. And you're like, there was that other hour. Where's the 2 o'clock hour?
Yeah.
So I'm not going to say I'm jet lagged, but that's always a little annoying. And then the Gopher basketball team finished a dreadful season in the most embarrassing fashion possible, just laying down and dying against the Northwestern Wildcats today. I want to point out that not only was Northwestern I think we were the 12 and they were the 13 seed in the Big Ten, but they had two of their starters get hurt and be out for the year. So we're playing a shorthanded Northwestern team and it was it was tied into the second half. And then the Gophers just stopped playing hard. It felt like this team just doesn't play hard consistently. I'm convinced, and they make bad decisions and that's those things are coaching.
Well, it definitely is. And, now that you brought that up, now I'm depressed all over again because obviously the Gopher hockey team got knocked out of the Big Ten tournament.
Out of the Big Ten tournament. And that's
by the worst team in the Big Ten, Notre Dame.
Yikes.
So
how does that even happen?
Yeah, it's embarrassing. Same thing, man. It's just too many stars, not enough team cohesiveness and grit and motivation, and it's the same kind of thing. It's just not enough consistent play, and that's like you said, I think that's on coaching, man.
Although at least you have the talent in hockey. In basketball, we don't have the talent.
Yeah, but the reason we haven't won a national title in hockey, which we should, once every 5 years, bare minimum, in my opinion. Because of all the talent that's there, it's the fact that it hasn't happened in 20 years is because of the lack of decent coaching that keeps them motivated and keeps them focused. That's my opinion.
That's crazy. Yeah, that would be it'd be like the Buckeyes going 20 years without a title. It would feel nuts in football. I mean, it would feel nuts if Ohio State went 20 years without a national title in football, right?
That's essentially the equivalent, in my opinion. And that's it should be the expectation every single year. And I think that it's just incredibly disappointing and disheartening. And at this point, Bob's a fantastic recruiter. He's a fantastic developer of talent and putting guys into the NHL, but he doesn't win national titles and he doesn't bring home the hardware. And that's the really frustrating thing. And the fans at this point deserve better, man. We've been waiting 20 years and there's no excuse with the way we recruit and the talent we have on the ice. It is insane that it hasn't even happened on accident at this point. So
you should be Ohio State and you've been Texas.
Yep exactly.
Yeah.
So it's frustrating. I get it. I'm not as big of a hoops guy, but I hear you. And it sucks, man.
The hoops, man, we were good when we were kids. The Gophers could play a little bit, but it's been a while. That is for sure. So Mark Coyle, athletic director of the University of Minnesota, he's got some decisions to make.
Yep.
He's got some big ones. I'm sure he is, basketball and hockey, the second and third, Minnesota, one of the few schools that does have a third revenue sport in hockey. But it's they got to figure it out because I do think apathy starts to set in a little bit when you consistently choke they have.
Yep.
And, and with the basketball, man, they can't even do the most basic stuff, right? It's just embarrassing. You've just a total waste of a year from Dawson Garcia, who's a legitimately great basketball player.
Yep. Yeah. Well, same thing, I guess with Gopher hockey, it's a waste of This is like legitimately probably the most talented team in college hockey. Like Boston College is obviously maybe equivalent or at least close. And the fact that, I won't be surprised if we get knocked out of the first round in the playoffs, and it'll be absolutely humiliating. But the fact that you're wasting all of that talent is insane to me. Because a couple of guys came back. They didn't have to. They could have gone to the NHL last year, but they came back. And for what? So
yeah,
get it together, Bob.
Exactly. All right, but Gopher hockey, there's still a chance. Maybe we're gonna look back in a month and be like, hey, they won the Natty.
I hope that's what happens. I hope I am wrong and all my misgivings are proven false, and I can celebrate the national title.
Yeah. Right on. All right. So should we talk football?
Let's do it. Yeah. Before we get into it, though, as always, if you want to find We Live for Saturday, find us on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and Podcast Addict. You can find us on Twitter at We Live for B1G Sat. You can find Mike at Alibaba26, and you can find me, John, at Norwegian Gopher. You can also email us, We Live for Saturday, b1g@gmail.com.
Awesome. So yeah, there was a certain podcast, because we're going to talk about the media just a little bit, because that's what we do, but this is going to be a mailbag podcast. So we are taking your questions that you patiently put in either recently, thank you for everyone who did it recently, or some of these are old, and we're going to answer them, and I'm excited about it. I think since we got onto YouTube, is this the first time we've done it's maybe the second time we've done a mailbag.
It might be the second, but yeah.
But it is the heart of the off season. Here we are in early mid-March, so there's no better time to check in with all of you and do a mailbag episode, and we're excited about it. But first, we're going to talk about another podcast, which seems like a strange thing to do, but we're going to do it briefly. And it's the Yahoo's College Football Enquirer podcast. And if you're not familiar with it, it is a very straightforward, sort of typical, and we'll talk about that, college football podcast with Dan Wetzel, Pat Forty, and Ross Dellinger. And Dan Wetzel had a really interesting couple of comments during his last episode, because he took a job at ESPN apparently.
Mm-hmm.
So congratulations to him, moving onward and upward, and we'll see if he gets another podcast going or not. But he said something that really stuck with me, a couple things. And I'm paraphrasing here because I'll be honest, I tried to find the spot a little bit where it was, but I wasn't going to listen to the whole podcast again to find the exact quote. And I couldn't find a transcript. I looked, then there was not one available. So he said that for the College Football Enquirer, this podcast that they have done, I think 600, they said, or 700
over
episodes.
700 episodes, yeah.
Over 700 episodes, once per week. And he said something that he had never done more than 5 minutes preparation for an episode. And then later said something to the effect that their 8-minute pre-show meeting was the longest pre-show meeting they'd ever done for their show. So look, Dan's a charismatic guy who's fairly entertaining. So I'm not really here to hate on him. I've listened to the podcast plenty of times, and Ross Dellinger, does a good job on that show as a college football journalist. So there are positive things about that show, but it kind of exemplifies our frustrations with the college football media. Because yes, these guys study college football for a living, so they bring in plenty of knowledge. It's not that they're devoid of anything useful or informative to say.
Yeah.
But they stick to the subjects they know best, which are two things. One, breaking college football news, and two, knowledge of the top 8 to 10 helmet schools in the country at a time. When they talk about anything else, that lack of preparation quickly becomes evident to everybody listening.
Yeah.
They don't do the necessary research to go in depth on subjects outside their limited wheelhouse, and that's fine. It's a perfectly cromulent college football show. It's like a top 40 station, right? Like, it'll play you all the hits, but you're not getting any of the deep cuts on the album, right?
Yeah. Yep.
And that's why we do this podcast. We do in-depth research every week on every Big Ten team so that we can help you gain a deeper understanding of the entire league, not just the top 5 helmet schools in Ohio State, Michigan, Penn State, Oregon, and USC.
Mm-hmm.
So I want to be clear. I'm not saying that what we do, I'm saying what we do is it's not a value judgment. It's like what we do is just a lot different than what they do. And the thing about what they do is that there are a million podcasts doing what they do.
Yeah.
Covering the top helmet schools and the breaking news of college football, and that's it. And we are one of the only podcasts out there. There are a handful doing what we do, and that is going in depth on all the teams in one league so we can totally understand the Big Ten and like bring that to you from top to bottom. So in my opinion, that's what makes us worth listening to. It's that it's not about being better necessarily, but we are different than what you normally get from other podcasts.
Yeah, there's definitely a handful of us out there that do the research that I know you and I do, and the work that we put into it. And those are the ones that I pay closest attention to.
Yes.
And I have the utmost respect for. And unfortunately, they're not sponsored or backed by Yahoo or CBS or ESPN or whatever. Because the fact of the matter is, a lot of those guys that are doing those are doing far better work and giving more in-depth information and knowledge that you would get from these guys who obviously, like you already stated, cover such a small part of the whole thing. And again, and I understand, they have other jobs, they're journalists, they write articles, all that kind of stuff. I get it that their schedule is busy, to be fair.
Yeah, totally.
But it is frustrating, I think, for those of us like you and me and other podcasters that we respect, that we know put in that time and dedicate themselves to this, to not see them get as much recognition and to see these guys, on that national stage get the recognition for terrible takes quite often or misinformation,
uninformed takes.
Yeah, exactly. So it's
well, they get pushed in the algorithm. The algorithm pushes corporate podcasts out, and independent podcasts have to like scratch and claw to make it.
Yeah,
that's just the way it is.
Yes. So we're proud of the work we do here, and I'm proud of the others that we support and who support us, and but it's disappointing. I don't know if this is going to go anywhere with anything else. I don't know if it's going to be just Pat Forty and Ross Dellinger now, or if they're going to bring somebody else on.
It's got to be somebody else, man. Pat Forty can't carry a podcast.
I'll listen to Ross Dellinger all day.
I'll listen to Ross Dellinger. He does great work, but even he is not like Dan Wetzel was the glue kind of holding that podcast together.
Yeah.
Ross Dellinger was the journalist with all the, cutting edge takes, and that's great. But like Dan Wetzel is the guy who is kind of entertaining people. So I think they need to replace him if they're going to keep it going. Yeah. And it'll be interesting to see if he gets a podcast at ESPN now or if he's just done podcasting.
Yeah, I don't know what his new job entails, if he'll have the time. But, I'm sure if that's a possibility, he'll jump on it. But as long as I don't have to listen to Pat Forty any more than I already do, I'll be okay with that. So
yeah, I'm with you there. We're trying to be nice, so we're not going to go any further than that.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm also with you. And we'll see what happens with the rest of that.
Yep.
But should we get into our own mailbag here?
Yeah, let's do it.
So thank you to everyone who submitted questions. We really appreciate it, and for listening to the pod and all that kind of stuff. Thank you so much. So first question: why don't you talk about recruiting very much? It's a really important part of college football. From James. So this is a really great question. Because the thing about recruiting is that it's extremely predictive, but not in the way people think it is. Like, for instance, a lot of people cite the Bud Elliott blue chip ratio thing where you can't win a natty unless half your roster is 4- and 5-star recruits.
Yeah.
And that's actually true. And to drill down more, everybody who's won a national title anytime in recent years, decades even, has had an average of a top 10 recruiting class at worst. So that means in every year, there's like 10 or 12, maybe a couple more schools who have that level of talent. Everybody else just isn't competing for national titles in the same way.
Yeah.
Also, teams take different number of players each year. So just because you have a top, the sixth best class or the 10th best class or whatever, doesn't actually necessarily mean on average you have that level of player, because it could be that you had more players than the teams ranked right below you, but they had better player rankings than you did. So you have to keep that in mind too when you're judging classes. A lot of it has to do with how big they are. But let's talk about how the tiers break down recruiting wise, because I think people think, John, that like if you have, let's say, the 23rd best recruiting class and I have the 28th best recruiting class, well, 23rd is better than 28th, right? So that should lead to better results on the field, right?
Yeah.
Theoretically. And it does if you're talking about like the second best class versus the 65th best class, right?
Yes.
That absolutely is predictive, and that's going to break down recruiting wise. But what you really have in recruiting is it's not an easy to say, this team's better than this team's better than this team. What you have are tiers, right? So you have teams that have about approximate the same amount of talent in different tiers, and you can compare them to each other. So I'd say here's how the tiers break down recruiting wise. You've got your top 3 to 5 classes every year. This is the tippy top. These are the teams absolutely competing to win titles year in and year out. This is Ohio State, Georgia, Alabama, and then whoever's hot out of Texas, Oregon, Michigan, LSU, Florida, whatever, right? These are the teams equipped to compete for national titles year in and year out. I would say Texas has been added to that, but in recent years, it's been Ohio State, Georgia, and Alabama have been the 3.
Yeah.
Right. Then you have the next tier, which is, we'll say 6 through, if we said generously, the first tier was the top 5. I think it's sometimes closer to 3, but this year is probably closer to 5, the way it shook out. Then you have roughly 6 through 16-ish, 16 or 17. These are the teams that are just below that perennial national title tier. These teams can compete at the highest level in the right years if their coaching staff is able to ID and develop talent at a top level. If not, this is where you start to see the teams that start the year every year in the top 10 or the top 15 and end the year outside of the top 25. And you're like, what happened? And it's that most of the teams in that tier are gonna play to the expectations of the talent that you have. But this is where you start to see where coaching identification and player development start to become a little more important, right? It's not, when you're recruiting at the Ohio State, Georgia, Alabama level, you almost can't miss.
Yeah.
Because like you or me can walk out there at a camp with the best players and see who the absolute biggest guys, biggest, fastest guys there are and most skilled. And you can see that. And the guys who are at the very top of that are pretty obvious to everyone.
Yeah.
Right? You don't have to be a highly paid football coach to be able to tell that, Jimmy is the biggest, fastest, highest jumping, most coordinated dude out there. Like, that's pretty obvious. But once you get down a tier, it gets a little harder. So you go from having those mid-high 4 stars and 5 stars recruits to having more lower tier 4 stars in this range, right? And the lower tier 4 stars, man, the difference between them and the higher tier 3 stars is usually how developed they are coming out of high school. But of course, it doesn't necessarily just matter what happens, how developed guys are coming out of high school. What matters is, what do guys look like after a year or 2 years or 3 years in your system.
Yeah.
So the next tier, and this is where the break goes crazy, goes from like 17th in the country to the low 50s. You're like, 50s, Mike? That seems like a big range. But I'm telling you, the difference between rankings and results is crazy. So the difference between the 24th ranked class in the country and the 42nd ranked class in the country is almost nothing. It's the difference between whether your low 4-star recruits actually develop better than another team's high 3-star recruits. And these are recruits who have similar athletic ceilings, but generally often, but like the lower 4-star recruits are the ones who are a little more polished coming out of high school. So this is where finding guys who fit your system and finding want to and grit and drive matters so much, because a high 3-star, a 3-star recruit, a mid-high 3-star recruit can have an athletic ceiling just as high as a low 4-star recruit.
Yep.
It's just a matter of whether they hit on it or not. Mm-hmm. So then the next break, and then what I'm saying is that's why teams like Kansas State, who usually recruits around like 50th in the country, often destroys teams who are top 25 ranked teams with top 25 talent. Because the difference is so tiny. The difference is whether you hit on many of your project guys, the guys who aren't ready to play immediately, but have the traits to turn into players, like we said, over 2 or 3 years. The guys who can hit after that, spending some time. So that next range is like the low 50s to roughly the low 80s. And that's where you find your lower tier power conference teams for recruiting. That's like in the Big Ten, that's like usually like Northwestern or Purdue. And then you also get the better group of 5 teams. So like your Boise States, your Tulanes, your Memphis, whoever's doing well in the Sun Belt that year, et cetera, where they are. So that middle tier, that tier from the 17th to the low 50s, that's where most of your power conference teams are. And the difference is almost nothing among those classes. It is a matter of how many of your guys hit. And as we've seen, some schools hit at a lot higher. Some coaches hit at a higher rate than others.
Yeah.
And the schools that hit at the highest rate are the ones who have the best teams, not necessarily the ones who have the exact highest recruiting ranking. So recruiting ranking is predictive, but it's only predictive into tiers.
Yeah.
And once you get into the tier, it is coaching, it is development, it is X's and O's, it is calling plays and developing a system that builds around your team's strengths and minimizes your team's weaknesses.
Yeah.
It's not enough to say you have the 18th best class, so you're going to be better than a team who's 40th or 50th. You're not necessarily. You just aren't.
And we've seen it happen many times.
And people, I think, don't understand that. They're like, well, our average player is an 87.5 and your average player is an 86.8. Yeah. Okay. So that means my guy was maybe grew a little earlier or was a little more better at, catching the ball early or route running or whatever. But that doesn't mean that they're going to be the best player long-term. The best player long-term is going to be the guy with the best athletic traits, usually more often than not, if he has the coordination and the want to develop those traits and become awesome. And that's why a team like, and I don't mean to humble brag here, but we are Minnesota fans. I'll say Minnesota 6 years in a row, I believe, has had a first or second round draft pick every year in the draft and is one of only 5 teams that have done that.
Yep.
There are teams that recruit better than Minnesota that don't do that.
Yeah.
That haven't done that haven't consistently turned out that top tier talent. So, yeah, man, recruiting matters. And like when you're in a recruiting battle and you're following it, you get all excited because you won a player and like, yeah, that's exciting and that's great and blah, blah, blah. But we're not going to spend a bunch of time talking about that on the show.
Yeah.
Like, yes, we'll talk in general if you have a recruiting class that's better than average or whatever, or like if you have a recruit that we particularly like, we might bring it up. But in general, man, because recruiting is so predictive just in tiers, we want to see the guy show up on campus and see who can play.
Exactly. Yeah.
And that's what we're more interested in, the guys who are already on campus already playing. So, like, yes, we knew going into last year, Jeremiah Smith was probably going to be a big deal because everybody told us so.
Mm-hmm.
But you don't always know who's going to be a big deal.
Yeah.
Not a lot of people knew that Coy Parrish was going to be a big deal.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I'll tell you what, you and I, neither one of us thought Luke Altmaier was ever going to be a big deal.
I thought after last year that there was going to be at least a quarterback battle.
After 2023, you mean?
Yeah. After 2023. But like he took a whole nother step up last year. So yeah. And
Luke Altmaier wasn't the highest rated recruit out of high school is what I'm saying.
Nope.
But right now, he is one of the 3 best quarterbacks in the Big Ten, hands down. No question.
Yeah.
So, yes, recruiting rankings matter. We care about recruiting. We pay attention. That factors into our analysis. But it is not something we're going to do all the time because, honestly, talking about where high school boys are going to go to college is boring. It just is.
Yeah, it doesn't interest me as much either. I do pay attention to a point, but it's tough, man. I
follow it, man, but it's like pulling teeth for me.
Yeah.
I follow it just because I want to know and be like, what tier are they in? And know, again, basically whether coaches are doing a good job of developing to the talent they're getting or not.
Yep.
You know what I mean? And that gives you an idea of ceilings and floors. But within that, there's a lot of range.
Yeah.
It's a lot of range.
I mainly only ever find out about certain schools like recruiting rankings because they tell me that they're better than Minnesota. And that's generally how I know. But
yeah, well, again, the rankings that matter are how many guys went to the NFL Combine and got drafted off your team, and how many all-conference players and all-conference honorable mentions did you have?
Yep.
To me, those are the real measures of how good your teams are.
Yeah. What did they actually do on the field?
Yeah.
Weird how that's like a thing.
I love this question. I love that we got this question.
Yep. Cool. Great.
Awesome. So thank you. I think it was James. Yeah. All right. Next one. And this is a simple one. All right, John. SEC Big Ten Challenge, for or against, from Tyler. So I'll let you go first since I just talked a lot. SEC Big Ten Challenge every year, in which the SEC and Big Ten would have, I guess, as there are 14 and 18 teams. So I guess we'd have 14 teams from the SEC play, or all the SEC teams play 14 teams from the Big Ten based on order of finish the previous year. Are you for or against the SEC Big Ten Challenge?
Technically, I am against it. I am against it. I don't want it because I don't want the SEC to profit in any way financially or just in anything. I don't want them to get anything positive out of their interaction with the Big Ten. So I don't want to see those games because I just don't want them to somehow do better because of that. And not even by beating us. I just don't want anything because I don't want anything to do with the SEC. So that I'm against. And I think with your argument as well, which I will totally agree with. But here's the point where I'm a little bit more indifferent. Okay. As far as just an entertainment purpose, I get it. I get what they're going for.
Oh, yeah.
I understand that. And yes, I think there would definitely be a level of it that I would probably enjoy as far as entertainment goes. But as far as results and the impact it could have on my team or the conference in general, and I'm not even saying that it's like, oh, I'm afraid to play another an SEC team. That's not what it's about. It's I don't want it to negatively impact anything, whether it's standings or I guess end of year results. I really want it to stay within the conference itself. I would be more in favor of, and I don't want this either, but I would be more in favor of the Big Ten going to 10 conference games then basically going to 10 conference games, but that 10th conference game being,
is an SEC game. 10 power conference
yes,
games.
there you
one
go.
Of them is an SEC.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I would rather just keep it within the Big Ten than play an SEC team. If the Big Ten plays an SEC team, it's in a bowl game, it's in the postseason, that's fine. And then I want to forget about them. I don't want to talk about them. I don't want to have to see them, anything like that. And so, entertainment, yeah, I'm sure I would have fun watching it to a point, but the long-term impact, I'm not into.
Yeah. All right. This is interesting. So I'm against it. And I'm going to say for a few primary reasons. One, it punishes teams for succeeding. So for instance, Illinois and Indiana just had big years. So then the next year, you're going to reward them by having them play a top tier SEC team out of conference, despite the fact that they may have lost, and in Indiana's case did lose, many of the players who led to the successful season in the first place. And that goes for the SEC teams too, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, so Indiana would have had a tough draw, finishing third in the SEC. So that would have been what, like Alabama or something.
Yeah.
So, the SEC, this isn't, for instance, last year, Mizzou and South Carolina and Ole Miss and a couple other teams tied for fourth in the SEC because they only play 8 conference games. So they have these massive ties, which are ridiculous. But I digress. If you had a Big Ten SEC challenge, one of those teams would be heading to Columbus to play the Buckeyes to start out 2025. Does that seem fair to anybody? Hey, Eli Drinkowitz, really good job at Mizzou. Now you're going to start next year in the shoe because you had a good year. Congratulations. Good job, buddy. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Or like, we're going to take Illinois and send them to play at Ole Miss because they had a nice year last year. Come on, man. That's, I don't know. I think it's so weird because you're actually saying the teams that do worse are getting rewarded.
Yeah.
And the teams that do better are getting punished by adding a tough game that's going to impact the college football playoff race.
Mm-hmm.
I'm also against it because it's hard enough to play 9 conference games as it is.
Yeah.
Some of the programs towards the bottom of the league will always be rebuilding. Those teams need to have the option of scheduling 3 likely wins in the out-of-conference season so that they have a better chance of making a bowl game. Then all of a sudden, you only have to go 3-6 in the Big Ten to make a bowl game. If you force everyone to play a 10th power conference team from one of the 2 best conferences, you're setting up teams to fail who are already struggling at the bottom of those leagues.
Yeah.
You're going to have more coaching turnover in the SEC and the Big Ten because you're going to have more guys look like failures earlier in their tenures. You just are. And I don't think that's good for the stability of the sport at all. And then finally, until the SEC agrees to play 9 conference games themselves, we absolutely are not going to. So now we have to play 10 power conference games, but you only have to play 9. Get out of here.
Yep.
Until they play 9 conference games, I am not making a deal with the SEC on any of this stuff.
Yeah.
If I'm Tony Petitti, I'm drawing a line in the sand and saying, hey, Greg, buddy, it's been great, but like this 8-game conference schedule, it doesn't work anymore. There's too many ties. It's too messy. It's too hard to rank the teams. You need a 9th conference game.
Yeah.
So yeah, I don't want to make any agreement with the SEC until they agree to that. And like, we shouldn't be indulging any of their cockamamie ideas, honestly.
No.
Yeah. Okay. That said, here's the argument for it. We can settle whether the conferences are similar or whether one conference is better than the other right away in the first month of the season. We can figure that out early in the year, and that would inform all the rankings and all the polls and all the speculating we're going to do for the rest of the year about which teams and which conference are really the best. So if you do it, you have a big jumping off point, and you're probably going to have a more accurate idea of where the conferences are in relation to each other, both at the top, at the middle, at the bottom, etc.
Yeah.
And throughout. So I think that's the argument for it. Also, the top tier games would feature playoff contenders, and it would be exciting to get them playing early in the year to set the tone. Texas Ohio State this year is an absolute banger of a game. If you had an SEC Big Ten challenge, you'd get at least 2 to 3 awesome matchups per year at the top of the leagues. That would be fun. And again, it would also inform eventual playoff seeding. And then just straight up more power conference games equals more compelling slates on September Saturdays. So I think that's the argument for doing it. But no, I think it's a terrible idea. That said, I'm against it. I just think it is so hard already to grind through 9 conference games in the Big Ten. You have got to give teams a chance to get to the postseason.
No, I'm with you. Yeah.
Right on.
I'm with you, man. I am. And really, on principle, the main thing of just, if you don't go to 9 conference games, then no, I'm not, we're not even having this discussion.
Yeah. All right. Next up, we have the question, rank your top 5 teams we would cheer for if we weren't Minnesota fans. So this was an email. Okay. This one's from Sarah. And I love this question. Mm-hmm. And you want to go, should we go back and forth 1 through 5?
Yeah, let's go back and forth. Yeah. All
right. Who's going first?
You start.
Okay. All right, man. I picked Ohio State number 1. I'm picking the Buckeyes because it's the easiest. They win the most. They have either the most money or the second most money every year behind only Oregon, but probably, like last year, probably had more money than Oregon. And unlike Oregon, they aren't heavily dependent on a single donor to fund their squad. So if you cheer for Ohio State, your NIL money will be well spent and you'll be getting a crazy return on your investment. You will have the better talent on the field in like 97% of your games. Ohio State's also located in Columbus, which is a vibrant, thriving metropolitan area that is completely behind the Buckeyes in every way. I've been there not just to a game, I've been to the game in the shoe. And it was one of the most memorable atmospheres I've ever seen for a football game. 10 out of 10 would recommend.
Okay. Fair enough. And plus, you probably get to experience what a national title feels like every once in a while. So that's cool.
I know, right? That would be sick.
Well, my number 1 is Penn State. Now,
okay.
I want a national title, of course, but I want that feeling of I want to work for it, and I want when we finally reach the mountaintop, the experience is going to be so enjoyable because we've been waiting for so long and worked so hard and come in basically, what feels like second place or third place time and time again. And when you finally reach that, get over that hump, it's just going to be that much sweeter. Where at Ohio State, I'm sure it's great every time, when you feel that and you win the Big Ten and all that kind of stuff. But I feel like there's a level of apathy when it comes with that, when you're just constantly winning all the time.
I mean, we've seen it from people we know who are Ohio State fans.
Yeah.
It's crazy. I don't understand it.
Even winning a national title, certain things still aren't good enough. Now, I don't want to live in that world. I want to. So Penn State, it's you still get to enjoy a ton of wins. You still get to be in the conversation of national title contender. You get into the playoffs. You have amazing talent. And Happy Valley, incredible college town.
Oh yeah.
Again, everyone is behind you. It is in a beautiful area. It's impossible to get to, but it is beautiful. And I just there's nothing like the atmosphere at Beaver Stadium, especially during a whiteout.
Seriously.
It is next level. It is peak college football. And
that place shakes.
It's insane. So for me, Penn State, I'm all about it. I've always really liked that program. They're easy to root for when they're not playing the Gophers.
Yeah, man. For number 2, I have Penn State for many of the same reasons. I'll also just add a couple things. I can't root for Michigan because I'm too bitter about us not having the Jug right now. And the Jug me wanting the Jug in general just takes me to a place where I can't root for Michigan. I just can't.
Mm-hmm.
So Penn State, for the same reasons for all the reasons you just said, the fact that they win a ton and they're a great program, but they're not quite at the top. And if they do break through and win, it's going to be like the biggest thing ever for that fan base.
Yes.
Like it'll be pandemonium. It won't be like a relief in a way like it kind of was for Ohio State.
Yeah.
It'll be just like pure jubilation. Absolutely. And they realistically could get there with the way they recruit, because they have really good NIL, not quite top shelf, but very close to the top shelf.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, man, I think Penn State. That's who I got number 2.
For me, number 2, and this may shock a lot of people, but it just has a place that's near and dear to my heart. When I lived on the East Coast for a long time, I lived in and around New York City, and the only Big Ten team that I could go see play football on Saturdays was Rutgers.
Mm-hmm.
And there's an affinity I have for that program. And I appreciate the fans. There's not many. It's not a big turnout, but there's definitely some people who just are very faithful and show up every single week, no matter how bad Rutgers is, no matter how good they're doing. And it's more nostalgic for me in a way. Like I get that Jersey vibe, there's something to say about those Jersey people. I'm engaged to one. So there's that. And so
that'll do it.
There's a piece of me that's always gonna, be attached to that state and that area. And Rutgers makes me feel that way, and I've got nothing but respect for Schiano. I think he's a fantastic coach, and for him to find even the level of success that he has now, which isn't, by most people's standards a lot. It's tough. It's a really, really hard job. So what he's accomplished there, I really respect. They play hard-nosed football, and I hope they continue to find some success. So for me, it's just my own sentimental attachment to the state of New Jersey and that area. So, and going to games there because it was fun. I had a good time.
Right on. All right, number 3. I have the Indiana Hoosiers. Look, I have a soft spot for Indiana. It's not any secret. My significant other comes from a family of rabid Hoosier fans. But it's more than that. Indiana showed with Curt Cignetti that they are willing to spend the money necessary to compete in this day and age. They are coming off the best season in school history with a guy whom I believe is the best coach in the whole Big Ten. They gave him a big salary, and they gave him a big salary to his assistants to make sure that he could keep as many of those top-tier assistants as possible. And then, along with having the guy that I think is the best coach in the Big Ten and who's got a unique energy all his own, that's a lot of it. The Cignetti factor. Like, don't get me wrong, that's a big part of it. But Bloomington's awesome as far as college towns go. There's a ton to do. The food's really good. The vibe's really good. It's beautiful there. There's a reason why John Mellencamp never left. You know what I mean? Like, Bloomington is a very cool place and is about as good as it gets as far as college towns go. So, and you've got a fan base that, is growing as a football fan base, but is also rabid about basketball. So you got sports, you've got the winter sport aspect of it too. Having, they haven't been great in basketball, but they're always trying to be great in basketball.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? So yeah, dude, I just think Indiana, it's a whole vibe right now. And I just kind of want to ride the Cignetti vibe. So if I got to cheer for somebody, I'm going to cheer for a guy who talks about how much everybody else sucks.
I love it. I get it. That's totally respect that decision. I love it. I love the Hoosiers right now, and I love Cignetti too. So I get that pick. For me, this also has to do with hating a team that I also hate. This is the Michigan State Spartans.
Okay. Yeah.
I'm all in on the green and white. I think I root for Michigan State because I also have an affinity for the D'Antonio era, which I had nothing but respect for. I loved the teams that he was able to put together. Their defenses were nasty. They were violent. It was just a lot of fun to watch. So but the main thing is just I have the respect for their hatred of Michigan. So we have that in common. So it's hard for me not to like them, and I don't see Michigan State as a rival. Like, I know that it can go back and forth, but I don't see that.
Yeah.
There's never any hate or bitterness between the two programs that I've ever really witnessed. And so it just makes it easy. East Lansing, it's all right. It's a pretty cool campus. I know I haven't spent a ton of time there, but I've been there. I've spent enough around the area. I'm sure that there's a lot of places I missed or wasn't able to get into. I was working, but
Right.
but I got a lot of respect for the fan base. Never had any issues, and like I said, it's hard to not root against not to root for a team that also hates Michigan. So there you go.
Well, I didn't think we were going to do this, but my next one is Michigan State.
All right.
Sparty hates Michigan. And as a traditional Gopher fan, I grew up loathing Wisconsin, Iowa, and Michigan in that order.
Yep.
And that's part of the appeal. It absolutely is. Sparty also, though, they take their sports seriously. They're never down and out for long. They have a rabid fan base.
Mm-hmm.
And because of the talent in state, they are a constant threat to rise up and be a national power.
Yep.
And yeah, it hasn't gone that well since D'Antonio left.
Mm-hmm.
That's true. And even towards the end of D'Antonio's tenure, he kind of lost the magic. But I love that Sparty hates Michigan as much as anybody. I like the all green look. I think it's a sharp look.
Yeah.
Especially when they go all green. And I remember growing up watching the Spartans and, competing against Michigan and like the hate and the intensity of that rivalry. And I like to be a part of intense rivalries.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I'm a Minnesota Gopher fan. The rivalry with Wisconsin is crazy intense. Crazy intense. The hatred is out of control. The 365-day nature of the rivalry is out of control. And then the Iowa rivalry, also filled with hatred and bile and the fact that we both think we're better than the other one is. They think they're better than us because they've had our number more often than not, even in very close games lately. And we think we're better than them because we live here and they live there. We get to live in the Twin Cities and they live in, Dubuque or whatever. So there's that hate. And man, nobody hates Michigan fans. I'm not going to say they hate them more than Ohio State fans, but nobody hates Michigan fans the way Michigan State fans hate Michigan fans.
True.
They hate them so much. And it's in state. So there's that contempt of having to deal with someone you hate every day of your life. Just seeing them in their cars and their stupid license plates and all of it that stay for their dumb schools. And that's the kind of in-state rivalry that you and I don't have.
Yeah.
We were lucky enough in a lot of ways to grow up in a state that is a one school state.
Yeah.
There's only one major program in the state. It's Minnesota, period, in football and basketball.
Yeah.
Not all other states can say that. Iowa can't say that. Wisconsin can't say that a lot.
Yeah.
But I do think there's something to that intensity of an in-state rivalry. So, yeah, man. And maybe it's just because I grew up and can still think of the Nick Saban at Sparty and what that was like, and Plaxico Burress when he was a thing, and all those memories. But yeah, I got Michigan State.
All right. Okay. Well, my fourth, I don't have a lot to say about this. It's just I've always had an affinity for Northwestern.
Okay.
It's probably when they've had their like gritty years where somehow they like get to the Big Ten championship, or when they've won it and you're like, how did that even happen? Because I still don't know, frankly, to a degree. There's a part of me it's still pretty miraculous. But
yeah, it was 95 they won a Big Ten title. 95.
Yeah,
it's been a minute, but they did it.
They
did it. Yeah.
So I think for me, it's the grittiness that was there. I know it hasn't been like that as much. I know Braun, although 2 years ago, Braun definitely seemed to be moving in that direction.
Yeah.
But it's also the location. I have such an affinity for the city of Chicago.
Sure.
I love the Great Lakes, and the fact that that campus is right there on Lake Michigan. It's got beautiful views. It's beautiful. It's the campus itself. It's such a short ride into Chicago. And it was honestly, it was one of my dream schools when I was applying to colleges. I did not have the academics to get in. Full disclosure.
I almost went there.
Really? No way. Wow.
Yeah, it was I was very close to going to Northwestern.
Wow. That's why.
That would have been a totally different. I'd be a totally different kind of Big Ten fan if I had.
God, yeah. Oh, imagine what world would that be like?
I know it would have been a weird world. I don't know. A world where I have to cheer for Minnesota and Northwestern. Talk about pain.
I guess. Yeah. Jeez. Oof.
Yeah. So I'm gonna not cheer for Minnesota. I'm gonna cheer for a team that struggles more. But good for you. I like that. I like that.
Yep.
And they are, they're kind of a try-hardy team that everybody you kind of love them because they are undermanned and they don't have a fan base really. Like the fan base is so small. It's pretty much just those two old people who keep paying for all their facilities.
Well, that's why I think maybe I have to try to like jump on board when I can because they need all the support they can get.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I love it. Perfect. All right. For number 5, I have, and it's going to feel like a cop-out, but you know what? I don't want my life to be that hard. Life is hard enough. I don't need my fandom to be as hard as it is. So I've got the Oregon Ducks.
Okay.
Look, Eugene's awesome as far as college towns go. More importantly, that as long as Phil Knight draws breath, you will have as much NIL money to use as anybody in college football. You got Dan Lanning, who's one of the great young up-and-coming coaches in college football. And that's all key because Oregon does not have good in-state talent. And in general, the entire Pacific Northwest does not have a lot of talent compared to other parts of the country. Also, man, I like that the stadium gets loud. Crazy loud. Apparently, some people think it's the loudest stadium in the whole Big Ten. Like based on decibels and like what they've measured. So it's I respect that, and it shows that that's a place that knows how to cheer. I also like, I like the Pacific Northwest as a region.
Mm-hmm.
Lots of good outdoorsy kind of vibes and, good stuff. Yep. So, yeah, Oregon 5th.
All right. Well, we're going to stay in the Pacific Northwest because for my 5th, it's Washington.
Washington. Okay.
Yes.
Like that.
Because
it's a good pick.
I too want to have a little bit of an easier time, but obviously I'm also a little bit of a glutton for punishment. So I ride the high highs and the low lows.
Yep.
And that's what you get as a Washington Husky fan.
Yeah, you do.
So they're competing for national titles. They're in that college football playoff conversation. Every few years and, but then they go right back down and they got to build back up. So, but I appreciate that. I respect that, they don't give up. And so I really love that about that fan base or about that school. And I think that it's also, again, Seattle's amazing. Like,
oh yeah, dude.
Like the camp. And I mean, let me just also say, let me start with just saying the campus is absolutely stunning.
Yeah.
You're right on the sound. Like you've got all these inlets and bays and it's just, and the stadium is like on the freaking water. I mean, it's just next level. And then you have Seattle. You have Seattle right there, which is an amazing city. So much fun, amazing food, like cool stuff to do. Outdoorsy stuff, just like Eugene, you can go climb mountains, you can go, skiing, you can go hiking everywhere. So I think that's just really, it's one of the most unique college campuses and areas to be, I think, in the entire United States, not just, so I love the Pacific Northwest for the same reason. And I've just always had a little bit of an affinity for the Washington Huskies. So they're my 5th team.
I like that. I like that with Chris Peterson when he was there. They were fun and they were fun, obviously, under Kalen DeBoer. Yeah, I totally get that. Back in the day, Brock Heward.
Yes.
Yeah, right on.
Cool.
All right. That was a fun question. Moving on. The rest of these were Twitter questions. So I will tell you people's Twitter handles who asked the question, and we appreciate all of them. is the season a failure for Penn State and Oregon if they don't win the Natty? From Drew Allerseason, who's a big Penn State fan. This is a great question, and I think it's two questions. It's Penn State and Oregon. So, John, whom should we address first?
Let's address Oregon.
Okay. So, here's what I think about Oregon. Yeah, Oregon's a Natty contender, and they deserve to be in the conversation. Oregon fans desperately want a Natty, perhaps especially Phil Knight. But here's the thing. They lost a ton of pieces off that team from last year, off the Big Ten title winning team from last year. And they are not only breaking in a lot of new players at a lot of different positions, but they're starting Dante Moore, who is still a relatively inexperienced QB. So I think for Oregon, if you fall short this year, you can talk yourself into the idea that, hey, this was Dante's first year in charge. We are breaking in a lot of new pieces. Things were all great that way. And, there were some mountains to overcome in that respect. And so I think you say 2026 is the year. You can talk yourself into 2025 being like a build year to get to where you want to go. And then 2026 being the payoff year when Dante Moore leads you to the promised land. All right. And I will just go. I think John's having a couple technical difficulties, so I will just pivot to Oregon. Oh.
I think I'm back.
You are back.
Okay.
I just got to remove your other self.
Oh, weird.
Yeah.
Yeah, lost you. Sorry about that. Okay.
No worries. So I was just saying that I think that Oregon, it's not a big deal if they don't win the Natty this year. And here's why. Because it's so many guys, it's their first year, including the quarterback, Dante Moore. So you can talk yourself into it's a brand new quarterback. It's a brand new bunch of players, on this team. Like all these guys are going to figure it out this year. And then next year in 2026, that's the year that we're all in to win a national title. So that's why I think it's not the biggest deal if Oregon doesn't win it this year.
I mean, I agree that it's not the biggest deal, but I do think that the expectation should be there. And which I think it is. And I don't think you're saying it's not.
No, I'm not saying it's not. I'm just saying that you can talk yourself into it not being a big deal if you don't win it.
Yeah. I mean, definitely you could. But also, I think you got to feel that sting though after winning the Big Ten and then getting knocked out of the playoff the way you did. Like, that's brutal, man. So there's got to be a lot of bitterness there, and I'm sure the fan base is like really hungry to avenge that and prove to the rest of the college football world that they are capable of winning a national title. So I think it's you can talk yourself out of thinking that like, oh well, next year's the year or 2026 is the year, but I don't know. I think there's a lot of fans that I have to think are like, no, man, like it better be now. Better be now.
Yeah, and I totally see where you're coming from. And the better be now argument is they just went undefeated, won the Big Ten title, and the only team that got in their way was the eventual national champion.
Yeah.
So with Ohio State taking a step back, Oregon should be able to walk right through that door. Yeah. I totally see that. That's a very compelling argument. I just think, man, maybe Dante Moore is the truth, but man, that's a lot to put on a first-year starter. Yeah. Because he played at UCLA some, but it wasn't great experience. It didn't go very well. It wasn't, it was a totally different system. So it's not like this guy has proven for sure that he can do it in the system. Mm-hmm. But yeah, so that's interesting. I like that we have different takes on this. I wonder if we'll have different takes on Penn State as well.
Yep.
So for Penn State, I think the time is now, man. You went all in on getting the best coaches with offensive coordinator Andy Kotelnicki last year. And now this offseason, defensive coordinator Jim Knowles, whom you stole, you paid a king's ransom to steal him from national champion Ohio State. that showed to me that Penn State was all in. You got your whole and very talented backfield back in running backs Nicholas Singleton and Katron Allen and quarterback Drew Aller. You got them all to forgo the NFL draft to take one more shot at a natty. You used your significant NIL coffers to get other potential NFL draft guys to stay as well. QB Drew Aller is a senior this year. And here's a fact for you, John. Ohio State, Oregon, and Michigan are all breaking in new quarterbacks this year. Drew Aller is going to be a senior third-year starter. So when will you ever have a team this veteran, a coaching staff this accomplished, and to top it all off, your biggest competition all have huge question marks, including at the game's most important position? Ohio State, Oregon, Michigan, all in flux on offense.
Mm-hmm.
It's now or never for Penn State, in my opinion.
I think it's now or never. I agree with that, but maybe I'm just so used to them falling short that
Okay.
like if or when they do, that I'm gonna be like, well, yeah, I mean, that's just what happens, So
Sure.
which sucks. I mean, as a Penn State fan, I'm sure is awful, and that's not at all how you feel, and nor should you feel that way. Just as someone from my point of view, I think it's just that's where it's at. I do think they have an excellent shot, and I think that the expectation should be that. But if it doesn't happen, it's just going to be another one of those. Well, James Franklin can't win the big ones, and here we are again, 11-1 or 10-2 or whatever. Like that's just the way it is. So, but I think they got a shot this year. I really do. I think they have to win one of Ohio State and Oregon.
Yeah, you got to beat one of them. You got to beat one of them. You got to win one of those games. Yes,
have to. Yep.
Absolutely, you have to win one of those games. It doesn't matter which one.
No.
But you gotta split. You gotta split those games. I agree with you, man, and I don't think it's gonna come down to James Franklin though. I think it's gonna come down to Drew Aller.
I agree.
Those receivers.
Actually. Yep.
Either the receivers are going to be better, and Drew Aller is going to go from a 68% completion quarterback to like a 73% completion quarterback.
Mm-hmm.
And if he does that, they were one play away from the national title game.
Yeah.
Now, granted, I think they would have gotten run off the field by Ohio State because Ohio State was running everybody off the field.
Yeah.
But they were one play away. So if they're better this year, if Drew Aller is better, and Ohio State and Oregon are a little bit worse, and Michigan is still got a freshman quarterback starting, True Frosh, I just don't think the stars are ever going to align any better for Penn State.
I agree. Yeah.
I don't think they're ever going to have a better chance than they do now with the coaching staff they have, with the players, with all of it.
Yep.
All right. Next one from friend of the pod, Max, our resident Ohio State fan, at Max_Geitman on Twitter. If you could win one national championship, but then get the death penalty and have to completely restart the program, would you do it? So here's what I'm saying. It depends on what completely restart means. Does it mean you have to go into the wilderness for 40 years to a group of 5 conference like SMU did? Or is it like Penn State, where you got Scully reductions for several years, but then you could bounce right back to where you were before? And also, it depends to me, do I get a Big Ten title also? Because you got to understand, as much as I want a natty, and I want it so badly, John, I can almost taste it. I think about it. I dream about it at night, what a national title would be like. I want it so bad. But as much as I want a natty, I want a Big Ten title just as much. Hell, I might even want it more. Because I've been waiting my whole life for a Big Ten title. So, yeah, I guess it's maybe this is Max is going to say it's a cop-out answer. I can hear him already. But that's what I'll say. If it's SMU death penalty, then no. I would rather go on and not win a natty ever than have to spend the rest of my life cheering for a shell of what it was.
Yeah.
And like thinking back to that one great year. That doesn't sound fun at all.
No.
If it's like a Penn State thing where I'm like, yeah, it's going to be rough for 5 years or so, but then we're going to be right back there, I'd take that trade every time.
Yeah. Well, and it really wasn't even that rough, in my opinion.
No, well, yeah, when they had the
but
scholarship reductions, they had pretty good coaching that helped during that time too.
But no, I'm with you. I think the same thing. I can't imagine what it would be like to drop down and be a group of 5 team, and not even not even
like a bad one.
Yeah,
like a bad one for 40 years, dude.
Yeah.
They were like, and they had a couple good years. Man, it was, and they still had the rivalry with TCU, but TCU could recruit better because they were in a better conference. So they just got crushed in their own rivalry over and over and over again. Dude, that's not just an in-state rivalry. That's an in-city rivalry almost. You know, that's a metro area you share rivalry. Like, it must have been brutal to live in TCU's shadow for all those decades.
Oh yeah.
Especially when TCU made it to a major conference themselves.
Yep.
You know? Oh, so yeah, no, I don't wish that on anyone, man. I wouldn't want to go through that.
Nope. No, I'm with you.
So yeah, I guess, Max, if you force me, gun to my head, then I guess I would say no if we're talking SMU. We're talking SMU level death penalty. All right. Next, from our pal, the Rican Raider. Does PJ Fleck retire a Gopher?
I don't think so.
Yeah, I don't think so either.
No.
Here's why. PJ's already been in Dinkytown for 9 years. He's in his mid-40s. So for him to retire as a Gopher, you'd have to convince me he's staying for an additional 25 to 30 years.
Yeah.
That would make his tenure 35, about 34 to 40 years. Like, nobody does that.
Not anymore.
Nobody's doing a Joe Paterno anymore. Dude, even Pat Fitzgerald got run out of town.
Yeah.
Now, granted, that was off the field stuff, but still.
Yeah.
Pat Fitzgerald was the only guy who could get close to that.
Yeah.
And he couldn't even do it because he couldn't.
Well, I mean, Kirk Ferentz might be the last. Like, when he
last.
retires, that'll be it, in my opinion. I don't think anyone's doing that again.
I agree. And here's what I think is going to happen. I think, and this might be a little bit of wish casting, but I think it's more likely that Fleck stays in Dinkytown for a long time, maybe another 10 years even, but that eventually he switches to broadcasting. He reportedly has some interest in that. His personality works great on TV. So I could see PJ eventually getting burned out and deciding, hey, I'm going to be a broadcaster and I'm going to be a public speaker. Because I don't know if you know, but PJ Fleck, if you want him to speak, it costs a pretty penny.
Yeah.
I dated someone once who worked for, I won't say the company name, but they paid him, I think, $15,000 to give like a 20-minute speech.
Yeah. Yeah. If you're on that level, you can make excellent money.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I could see PJ retiring once he's done coaching enough, retiring and going to that level, to the broadcasting and speaking circuit.
Yep.
And just kind of living the high life, you know, living it up, having a good time, not having to work that much, and just letting it go instead of doing the thing you do when you're a football coach where you grind, you know, every day, except for the few weeks a year you get on vacation.
Yeah. No, I'm with you, man. I think that's the way it would probably go, but it's mainly the fact that just head coaches just aren't going to do that anymore. That's just not the way.
No, they're not going to stay forever. And like, you know what? PJ could leave next year, you know? He could leave anytime because coaches can leave at any time.
Yep.
But I will tell our rivals, he stayed for almost a decade, so you don't get to say that he was just trying to bolt.
Yeah.
He's put up shop for a long time. So it's been a minute.
Yeah. Well, we hear it every year from our rivals. So he's gone.
You know, honestly, the last couple, they don't say it as much. Like after the UCLA thing didn't happen, you notice I haven't heard them say anything else.
Not yet.
Yeah.
But we also haven't gotten a hit piece yet, so we're waiting on that.
Yeah, it's true.
That's the once a year thing too. So we'll see.
I'm glad. I'm hoping that particular tradition is over of the fake hit piece on PJ Fleck, which is something we can explain to you off. If you're like, what is that? We're not going to explain now, but you can DM us and we'll talk about it.
Yeah. Yep.
All right. This next question, John, I almost didn't include it because I don't really want to answer it. I don't. But our friend Pitt Hoosier 1 said, let's say the Big Ten contracts instead of expanding again and 4 teams are booted. Who goes? I hate this question, and here's why. I don't think it'll ever happen, and I don't want to see it happen because I think that all the teams in the Big Ten bring a lot to the Big Ten.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the valuable, media markets, recruiting territory, all fans, all kinds of stuff, So I don't think it's going to happen ever, but it's an interesting question.
Yeah. I mean, I agree. I think that, that's not the intention. I think they brought this all together and they're continuing to build and grow. And I think they will. For a reason, there's a grand master plan behind all of this. And it's been building for decades. So I agree. But if I had to, am I going with feeling or am I going realistic? Like
I went realistic, but you can go with feelings too and just kick out all our rivals.
All right. Feeling. Wisconsin, Iowa, Michigan, Nebraska, you're out. That's it. You're gone. You're gone. You're going to be in the Big 12. Have fun. That's what's happening. You're essentially a G6 or G7 team now. So have fun there. Realistically, I have to say and I hate it because it's not. I don't feel good about it. Any of them, and I wouldn't really feel. I mean, I would feel it would be kind of funny, but I wouldn't want it. Let's just say that I don't want to ever lose our rights.
We are opposed. We think this is a terrible idea. We'd never want to see it happening. We are only answering this question to be nice to Pitt Hoosier 1.
I think. I mean, you have to look at, and I hate this because I hate podcasts that continue to do this crap. But since we're being forced to right now, because this is not our choice, it would have to be the worst performing teams in programs. And so that would be Northwestern. That would be Purdue. That would probably be Rutgers. And then maybe, I don't know, like, are you talking like Maryland and UCLA?
I put Maryland next.
Yeah. Maryland.
I'd say Maryland or UCLA. Those would be the two.
Yeah. So, I guess it would have to be so Northwestern, Purdue, Maryland, and then
Northwestern, Purdue, Rutgers, and then either Maryland or UCLA.
Yeah, okay,
I think in that order.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. That's where I'm at.
Yeah.
If they had to, for whatever reason, that's the way I would see it go. Yeah.
Right on. But we never want to see that, obviously.
Nope. No, we don't.
All right. Here's something we kind of talked about this, but not totally. Will Oregon be able to contend for a Big Ten championship again this season and the national championship, or do you think the QB room is too much of a question mark? From our friend and fellow pod, Gridiron Uncensored.
I think Oregon can absolutely contend for a national championship this year. That's the simple answer. I don't see how they can't, unless Dante Moore just falls off a freaking cliff, which I don't see happening.
Here's the thing. If Dante Moore wasn't, they've had him for over a year now, right?
Yeah.
Since he transferred there.
Mm-hmm.
If he wasn't the truth, they would have hit the portal.
Yeah.
Because they have the money to do that.
Absolutely.
So I think if there was any question about whether Dante Moore was legit and ready, I think they would have gotten somebody else. So the fact that I trust Dan Lanning. So the fact that Dan Lanning didn't think he needed anyone else makes me think that Dante Moore is the goods. And if Dante Moore is the goods, man, Oregon's got the players. Granted, it'd be a matter of them gelling because a lot of them are out of the transfer portal still, right? They're hitting the portal really hard along with high school recruiting. So they're doing really well in both. But, yeah, there's a lot of portal guys. You know, how long does it take guys like Dylan Thieneman from Purdue to get up to speed with the defense? And yeah, but no, dude, I think I think Oregon's going to be a threat. I think they're going to be a threat. They're going to be a threat until they win a national title or Phil Knight dies.
Yep.
And at that point, we'll see how much he cares about them still being good after he's gone.
Yeah. Yep.
Because, you know, you say, oh, they're going to keep giving forever, but people thought T. Boone Pickens would give more of his estate to Oklahoma State than he ended up giving, which is part of the reason why Oklahoma State has fallen off a little bit.
Yeah. Yeah. No, absolutely.
So that'll be interesting. Yeah. Great question. Thanks, Gridiron Uncensored. All right. And then this last question, we talked about this on a previous episode, so we're not going to go too in depth. If you want to go back, I think it's named in the episode, so you could figure it out. It's a one talking about the playoff, but from Ben Weinberg, thoughts on scheduling reform? Should the playoff go to 14 with 4 AQs? Should the Big Ten go to 10 conference games to get more head-to-heads and clarity? The whole concept makes non-conference meaningless anyway. So we talked about this in a previous episode. We don't go too in depth here, but I'm opposed to 10 conference games. I think it is already so hard for so many teams to get to the postseason, and I don't want to see it become any harder. I think that would be bad for the overall fan morale in the sport. And I think there'd be a lot of fan bases that would suddenly be in a worse position, not seeing the postseason as much, with less to get excited about. And I think those fans, you start to lose those fans at a certain point, right? Yeah. A lot of them. The diehards will stay forever, but a lot of them will start to tune out. So I don't like the 10 conference games thing. I'm opposed to that. John, where you stand on the 10 conference games?
Yeah, I don't like the 10 conference games either. And the only way, not that, again, I still wouldn't be happy about it, but like the only way it would ever make sense, or I'd be like, I'd find a way to maybe justify it or sign off on it mentally to some degree is if every conference went to 10 games. I just think that if there's an equal playing field to that point, the SEC, the Big 12, ACC, as long as it's still around, does that, I think then, okay, maybe I can find some way to accept it, But if it's just the Big 10 and, the SEC is still at 8 or okay, they go to 9, but now we're at 10. No, I'm not okay with it. That's not my ideal situation. I know that idea is being thrown around a lot. I know that it's, it might happen someday, if the conference goes to 20 or plus teams, like maybe they will, and the Big Ten will have its own playoff, and the champion of that will play the SEC. I know that's like a whole freaking idea. I don't want it. I'm just saying that's that stuff that's been thrown around now for a while for these super conferences, but, we'll see, it's not what I want. No, but I'm not going to say it's impossible because we've seen college football change a lot lately. And
I'm not saying it's impossible. I'm strictly talking about what we want or don't want.
Yeah.
It could happen. I just don't want it to.
Yeah.
That's where I'm at. Here's the thing. We already don't play teams very much. We've played Indiana like 4 times since 2008.
Yeah.
When we were kids, we played Indiana every year.
Yep.
You know what I mean? So or just about every year. So we already don't play lots of teams in the Big Ten as often as we wish we did. So I don't think it's worth it to make that many fan bases miserable just so we can play Indiana every 3 years instead of every 5 years.
Yeah.
That's where I'm at on that. And then what about going to 14? Yay or nay?
I mean, I like 12. I want to see how it continues to go.
Yeah, me too.
I don't hate it. It's but again, like my main issue is I want to see more home games earlier on in the playoff. And I mean, I don't think I really want the buys are not. I didn't like how that was set up this year either. So that would need to change.
Yeah, well, that's the thing. I don't like the AQs. So that brings us to the other part of the question. I don't like the Ben. I don't like the automatic qualifying thing. Yeah. I say seed them in order 1 through 12 or 1 through 14, whatever it is.
Yeah,
I like 12 and 14 are both good. I'm pretty indifferent as long as the first couple seeds have buys because I think that's important.
Yep.
I think they've earned that. But I just don't want to see automatic qualifiers, because the thing is, if you say it's 4 for the Big Ten this year and 4 for the SEC and 2 for the Big 12 and 2 for the ACC, well, the ACC might not have 2 teams that are worth it, or the Big 12.
Yep.
And the SEC or the Big 10 might have 5 teams one year that are deserving. So, but then they don't get them in because they only have 4 as an AQ. So I think you're kind of biting out, like you're trying to prevent your team from getting left out. But I think the best teams are going to get in anyway, for the most part.
Yeah.
Like, yes, the SEC has the advantage of getting favored in the polls every year.
Yes.
But that's already kind of baked in. And the Big Ten still got in 4 teams despite that last year. So I think the Big Ten is going to get in plenty of teams. And I think the AQs actually are going to hurt the Big Ten some year. And there's going to be some year where the Big Ten has 5 legit teams, and 4 of them are going to get in. And the teams that get in are going to be the helmet schools, and the team that gets left out are going to be whatever non-helmet school jumped up and had a great year. And I hate that. So I hate AQs. See them 1 through 12 or 1 through 14, whatever it is, and don't do it. In the conference champions, you don't automatically get a bye. You get seeded. You automatically get into the tournament, the top 4, for being a top 5 or whatever conference champion, but you get seeded based on what you're ranked. Period.
Yeah. I'm with you. That's how I feel as well.
Awesome. John, we did a whole mailbag episode.
Yeah, it was fun. Been a while. We should do more.
Yes, we will. So please keep sending us your questions, as we love doing mailbag episodes. Between, because we're all just friends here, I'll say we still do a lot of prep, but it's slightly less prep than it would be on our normal themed episodes. So that was nice too. And this was great. I had a really good time. Thank you so much, everyone, for listening, for submitting questions, and, for being there with us. We've got a lot of exciting things coming up on the pod next week. Don't miss next week. We're going to finally do what we've been threatening to do. And we're going to have our State of the Union.
State of the Union.
State of the Union of the Big Ten in college football.
Yes. Yeah.
So, yes, there have been some reasons why we couldn't do it up until now, but we're going to do it fashionably late, because why wouldn't we be, right?
Yeah.
All right. Anything else you want to say, John, before we get out of here?
Yes. If you want to find We Live for Saturday, find us on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and Podcast Addict. Find us on Twitter. We Live for B1G Sat. You can find Mike at Alibaba26. You can find me, John, at Norwegian Gopher. And you can email us, We Live for Saturday, B1G@gmail.com. Please follow, subscribe, like, comment, all that good stuff, and share it. We'd love that. Thank you.
Yes. And if you're an audio only listener, please go to one of your email addresses. Just go to YouTube. All you have to do is go to YouTube, subscribe to the podcast. It helps us a ton. We're looking to keep growing it throughout the off season. We have some big plans for that. So please, if you can give us a follow and rock with us, and we're going to have a good time this whole off season, and then all of next year as well, because football never sleeps for us, John.
No, it does not.
It never goes away. All right. Awesome. Thanks, everybody, for listening, and we will see you in the next one.